My name is Jay Sugarman, and I want to welcome you to Museum Open House. This ongoing series features and highlights many of the outstanding museums and other cultural institutions. The main purpose of most programs is to inform viewers about current and upcoming exhibits, various programs, resources, and other opportunities that are available for visitors today. Today, via Zoom, we're fortunate to have as our guest Lydia Peabody. Lydia is an assistant curator for exhibitions and research at the Peabody Essex Museum. She also served as one of the curators of the very engaging exhibition entitled Gio Swaby, Fresh Up, which is currently on display until November 26th. During the program, we're finding out why and how the exhibition came about. We'll go on a behind-the-scenes tour, and in the process, come to better understand and appreciate Gio Swaby as a multidisciplinary artist who incorporates a range of textile-based techniques as she explores different aspects of Black womanhood. Let's start by meeting Lydia and then hearing all about Gio Swaby, Fresh Up. Welcome, Lydia. I'm delighted you're able to be here again.
Thank you, Jay. It's wonderful to be here with you.
You know, last week I had the wonderful opportunity to visit the exhibit. I'm eager to learn more about Gio Swaby and her work and have you inform visitors. But before we begin, I think it would be of interest if you'd briefly share just a little background information about Gio Swaby as a person and an artist, please.
Sure. So Gio is an extraordinary Bahamian artist. She's 32 years old. She grew up in Nassau. Her mother was a seamstress. So she grew up with fabric and thread abound. She is the youngest of 4 sisters. And she grew up in this really strong matrilineal household where sewing and color were very much a part of her upbringing. She didn't necessarily grow up going to museums. She didn't really come into the sort of art world until she went to college. And in college, she experimented with a lot of different practices and techniques, but sewing always seemed to sort of come back. And so she did her undergraduate and her graduate work in Toronto, where she's currently based, and has been actually living in Canada for the past 10 years. So this exhibition really came about after her first gallery exhibition, which was at Claire Oliver Gallery in New York in 2020. So in the middle of the pandemic, which, you know, unfortunately we couldn't travel to go see the show, but I was looking at it online, and the images that I was seeing online of how visitors were engaging with her textile portraits was incredibly intuitive and powerful. People were posing in front of them as if they were the subjects. And so I knew that I needed to bring the exhibition to PEM.
Yeah, you know, as we enter the exhibition, we have a wonderful selection of images which will give viewers a sense of the flow and what's available. But as you mentioned, in person, you really have to be there to truly appreciate her craftsmanship. Before we jump right in, just a quick word on some of the curatorial thoughts you had in laying out the exhibit.
Sure. So I should mention that the exhibition was organized by the Art Institute of Chicago and the Museum of Fine Arts St. Petersburg, and PEM is the final venue of the tour and the only East Coast venue. And as the organizing curator for PEM's presentation, I really sought to design the show as if it were an embrace. So that the first couple of works in the show start pretty small scale and intimate, and then they grow. The portraits become life-size, as we'll see later on. And then they come back to a little bit more personal sort of scale. So this idea of being surrounded, being embraced by your loved ones was at the core of our curatorial concept.
And I know Gio Swaby's work comes through a series of collections of series, I think is often noted. And first one we want to hear a little bit about is Another Side of Me.
Sure. So she's making, textile-based portraits, right? So there's no paint on any of these. It's all fabric and thread. So I feel like I always have to just say that, right? And the first works of art in the exhibition really highlight her singular technique. So I don't know if we have any quilters who are watching the program, but you'll know that the underside or the backside of quilting is the side that has all the bobbin thread, that has the knots and the mistakes perhaps, and it's usually the side that is concealed. Well, here she's actually revealing that side. That's the side that we are looking at. And so in Another Side to Me, Gio is making the very vulnerable gesture, but also the very strong gesture of celebrating imperfections. We're human, we're not all perfect. And in these particular portraits, you can see the threads sort of dangling down, right? You could sort of trace where her needle is going and follow her hand. There's knots. And so she's making these at her free motion quilting machine, using the needle and thread to draw, and then flipping the canvas over so that we can see, the side, this underside, this another side.
And then she's continued and developed this series with some wonderful addition of color here.
Yep. So this is from Another Side to Me, second chapter. So this is a continuation of her free motion quilting. And in addition to showing the underside, we now see fabric that's been appliqued after she flips over the canvas. So all these patterns are fabric that she sources in Canada. She sources online. She likes to buy a lot of fabric when she goes home to Nassau. And so all of these are very intentionally sewn onto the canvas. All of these portraits, this is particularly a self-portrait, the previous were of her friends. All of these portraits start with a photo shoot. So she invites the subjects, her friends, her sisters, into her studio where she hosts a photo shoot. And in this photo shoot, she builds perhaps an even deeper new relationship with the subjects. And she talks about a moment in which the subjects seem to relax and come into their own being. They become really self-possessed and confident. And that is the photo that she uses for the basis of her textile portraits. So what I hope visitors will also notice is the way in which the subjects are looking. So they're very confident, and their eyes sort of look beyond that of the viewer, right? They're not meant as objects of our desire, right? They are there celebrating themselves and in confidence. And so the fabric choices that she's using, particularly here with this blue coat and the yellow pants, those are fabric choices and colors that she's composing onto the canvas and referencing the energy and the conversation and the depth of a relationship that she and her subject had in that photo shoot.
That sense of confidence goes throughout the exhibition, and I think ties in nicely to the phrase fresh up. Would you share a little bit about the significance, the meaning of that in the title?
Sure. So fresh up is Bahamian lingo. It means it's a way to compliment somebody who's rather confident or has like a really nice outfit on. So the artist would say, Jay, you're looking fresh up today.
Really nice. I don't get that too often, but I appreciate it. Moving on to the next one, and this continues sort of the fun aspect of the exhibition, going out clothes. A couple of words about this series.
Yeah, so this series, the artist will tell you, and she does, she actually has authored all of the wall text that you see in the show. So all the section panels that open up the series are her own voice. And she'll tell you that in the Bahamas, they have 3 categories of clothing. So she had yard clothes, she had church clothes, and she had going out clothes. And she often tried to wear her going out clothes to church, and her mother would say, no, you cannot do that. So going out clothes is really an ode to that practice of putting together an outfit that makes you feel really good and makes you feel really confident. So the portrait that we have in this series and the exhibition is a little different, you know, than the other portraits you'll see, largely because of its shape. So we have a circular portrait here that perhaps is a nod to a little bit more traditional embroidery, using like the embroidery hoop. But what I hope visitors will notice in this particular portrait is that really expertise in piecing that Gio is using. So the way in which she uses that yellow fabric for the sweater, you know, composed next to the blue fabric of the pants. My favorite part of this portrait happens to be the glasses. So she's using pink fabric just to make them pop a little bit, and that extra care in the accessories is really important.
Yeah, it's stunning for sure. Moving on to an area that very meaningful throughout, sisters. As you mentioned, the exhibition highlights, well, Gio, but also friends and her family. A couple of words about her sisters and these 2 panel areas. We're going to see Pretty Pretty and Love Letter.
Sure. So the sister section, this is a section that is probably my favorite place in the gallery. We have her 3 sisters from 2 different series looking at each other. And, you know, she was working to create textile portraits of the women in her life to celebrate the community that she loves, that has supported her. And I think somewhere along the line, her sisters were like, hey, when are you going to make a portrait of us? You know, she was making them of her friends and of herself. And she talks a little bit about the courage, you know, it takes to really create a portrait of somebody that you've known, you know, your whole life, the longest in your life. And so these are examples of her first foray into making life-size portraits. So the portraits that we've seen earlier are a little bit smaller in scale. These are totally life-size. This series that we're looking at is the Pretty Pretty series. And you'll see a continued exploration of that line work. So where she's using the needle and the thread to draw, but she is now really intentionally adding fabric applique to really communicate some personality. So we have some of her sisters, for instance, the middle sister, like she has her nails always done, I've heard. So her nails are done in her portrait. Another sister really tends to her shoe wear. So her shoes are really loved and like dedicated to. And then on the other side of this gallery, you have the same sisters, but from a different series, which is the Love Letter series. And in this series, she begins to cover the entire canvas with fabric. So it's much more in a quilting practice, perhaps, right? And the colors and the vibrancy here really pop out. She's using very intentional sparkly fabric around the skin tone and the hair. And you'll see Melissa's portrait, which is all the way to my right. She's crouching down. It's as if she could stand up, right? And like claim space. So there's a lot of dynamism. There's a lot of movement in these portraits.
For sure. You know, in addition to the different series, there are several wonderful interactive features throughout. Want to look at a couple. How about this area here? What can visitors enjoy and experience?
Sure. So this is our self-reflection station. So if you are interested in taking a selfie in the show, it's very much in line with the confidence that Gio wants to communicate through her portraits. So this is next to our going out clothes section, and we invite our visitors to take a picture of themselves and who they're with, and celebrate their relationship and their being and their confidence, and post the selfie to our social media channels. So this is a very much continuation of this cultivation of love.
And building on that, another way people can take that theme and connect with others is to write a postcard to someone.
Yeah, absolutely. So Gio, you know, she really calls her portraits love letters to Black women and girls, right? She's making this for Black women and girls to see themselves represented in a space that they've been historically excluded from, and also celebrate that self-confidence and that cultivation of love. And so we're taking these themes from the artwork and creating an interactive where we can continue to spread that love. So we've had some really great postcards sent by our visitors to loved ones. So folks can write a postcard and then drop it in those 2 mailboxes behind the table, and the museum will mail them.
Terrific, terrific. Well, let's continue to another fun area, gallivanting.
Yes, gallivanting. So this is the largest work in the show. This is a 3-person portrait, a triptych. So this is sort of this is a great image, right? So this is, you know, she's really continuing to explore these techniques that she has in the love letter series, covering the entire canvas with fabric. But here she has 3 different subjects in one portrait. And she made this work during COVID, when she too, of course, couldn't travel, and she was really missing her friends and her family. And gallivanting is, of course, a play on words. So gallivanting and then gals. So her friends, you know, what it means to go out with your friends and have a good time. So that like camaraderie and that love. And so she made this very much while missing her friends. And what is really wonderful about this specific piece is that we can really look at some of the incredible fabric choices that she's making. In particular, in this one, is a great example of how she's using Bahamian fabric. So the creamsicle colored shoes of the middle subject is made with Androsian batik fabric made on the island of Andros in the Bahamas. So Gio, this is, you know, she talks a lot about, this is the fabric that she grew up wearing. Her mother wore it during the Bahamian independence in the 1970s. This is very much part of her heritage. And here she is infusing that, you know, directly into the portrait. So it's very special.
No, it's fascinating as we make our way through the exhibition to follow her development and expansion in different areas, and just another venue for her creativity. And just a quick word, I know one other nice feature throughout the exhibition is music and playlist. And I know, reading a little bit about her and the process that you described earlier, music is an important part to sort of get her ideas flow going. And again, a wonderful compliment to walking through the exhibition.
Oh, well, thank you. No, the music was really important. It was actually the first question I asked the artist when I met her. So I was learning more about her and her practice, and I was at a panel that she was on, and she was talking about this photo shoot, you know, where the magic sort of happens behind the scenes. And I just asked her, you know, what are you listening to? What are you playing in that photo shoot? Or what are you listening to when you're sewing? So from that conversation came this really beautiful collaboration where she was able to curate a playlist that very much speaks to her practice and, you know, the act of making these works. So it's very fun to walk into the gallery and have Gio's playlist playing.
Yes, yes. Well, let's go to a couple of the other areas and this exquisite piece, My Hands Are Clean.
Yeah, so this is a piece that's actually, it's the cover of the book, which is behind me, and we have a large graphic of this work outside the gallery. It's actually rather small in scale in person. It's about 12 by 18, which is always you know, pretty surprising because, of course, and here on the screen, it's very commanding, right? And so this is a self-portrait, and the artist started working on this series when she was in undergrad in Vancouver. She had moved to Canada from Nassau, and there's a very small Black population in Vancouver. And unfortunately, she was experiencing a lot of microaggressions and aggressions of people wanting to touch her hair. So the title of this series, My Hands Are Clean, is the unfortunate rationale that people would use and say to her as a way to invade her privacy. So in response to this feeling, she created these works that are incredibly powerful. For me, when I look at them, I'm noticing that she's neither smiling nor really frowning. She's really just being and taking up space and being confident in herself and being self-possessed. And for me, that is about reclaiming that power. And then, of course, we have the expertise in her technique here with her choice in the fabric. And in this particular portrait, the way that she uses the floral fabric to communicate and suggest her own body, like in conversation with her hair and the twists that are also left just to the line work, is an incredible artistic composition that rivals, you know, any art form, painting and sculpture and drawing, right? She's doing this with fabric and thread. So to me, that's just completely astonishing.
Appreciate you pointing that out. And yeah, just another way that the theme of confidence is coming through the exhibition. And in closing, that continues, picking up on My Hands Are Clean with New Growth. What's her intention with this series?
So this is the last series that we have in the exhibition. And, you know, like I said, it went from small to big, back to sort of small and intimate again. So this is a series of work where she is really riffing off of the silhouette shape, right? Like they're a little bit different than what we've seen before with the other textile portraits, the life-size portraits, of course. Here she's using her expertise in laying out fabric and really communicating a lot of information with very subtle gestures. So some of these, you know, you have the tilt of the chin, you have the nod sort of the head, and those just minute gestures really communicate a whole personhood. So the way in which she's making these portraits is very much in conversation with silhouettes. And then, of course, the title, New Growth, very much a continuation of her celebration of Black hair and Black women's hair. So New Growth is a way in which to call the new hairs that emerge after a style change or after a big haircut, for instance. And here throughout this series, she's really celebrating that encyclopedia of hairstyles of Black women.
No, and I found especially, I mean, throughout, but especially in this series, the colors are just so outstanding. There's a range of rainbow, and they just jump right out at you, as we can see in this one.
Absolutely. So she she grew up in the Caribbean, right? So she loves color, and anybody that watches our video in the gallery and hears her talk can see that she loves to wear color. Color is very important. And in this particular series, also flowers are very important, right? So she uses a lot of fabric that have wonderful flowers and fauna and nature in them as a way to really nod to her upbringing of growing up in the Bahamas, but also the way in which flowers are part of nature. And of course, we are all part of nature.
What's been some of the reaction and feedback from viewers, from perhaps others in the field, artists that you've heard, observed?
Well, the only feedback I've heard is really positive. So, on several tours that I've given of the show, it's been people of all different experiences relating to the work in really unique ways. And that is, of course, what we hope for, that everybody can really see themselves or see a connection to the work. We've had a lot of students and young people who are really engaged in our interactives that I've seen, which is so fun. I also this morning gave a tour to members where folks were writing love letters, to family members too. So really the feedback I have seen has been really positive, and a continuation of the love that Gio is delivering through her artwork.
And it's wonderful to know, for those who haven't made their way yet, it's going to be on display well into November, towards the end of the month, November 26th. So plenty of time to take it in, and all the other wonderful things that are available at the Peabody Essex Museum as well. Just a quick note in closing, you mentioned the book, the catalog sort of that comes along with it. Just a word or two about that, please.
Sure. So the book is available in our shop if our visitors are inclined to continue their exploration of Gio's textiles. So there's wonderful essays in the book. There's an interview with Nicole Hannah-Jones and the artist in the book. So it's really special to have this work and this book, especially as the exhibition, will eventually close. So we hope that our visitors find some joy in that.
For sure. Lydia, unfortunately, we've come to the end of the program. I want to thank you again for taking the time to be here. It's been fascinating to learn even more about Gio Swaby, and want to congratulate you on the success of the exhibition.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Look forward to your next exhibition coming up in the near future for sure. Also want to thank those of you watching for joining us, and hope you'll be able to tune in next time.